Brought to you by DK Audio.
What the Shadows Hide by M.J. Lee. Read by Dan Bottomley. Sunday, August 24th, 2008. Chapter 1. He knew he was near death. He'd seen his grandmother standing in the corner of the room, hiding in the shadows, beckoning him to join her, waving as she always did with her right hand, saying, "Come along, hurry up. Why are you always so late?" And then she had gone, vanished. He shook his head, trying to clear it. Was he seeing things, or was this all real? The heat was unbearable, a dry, coarse heat that made his throat rasp like sandpaper as he tried to swallow whatever saliva remained in his parched mouth. He tried to raise his head from the mattress laid over the wooden floor, but gave up when the effort became too much. Next to him, his sister lay, her hands clasped in front of her, as if in prayer. What had they done to deserve this? He inched his head towards her lips, listening for the sounds of life, but there were none. She hadn't moved for a long time. Was she still alive? He doubted it. He heard no breathing, no whimpers, no cries of pain, nothing. He wasn't sure how long they had been in this room. A small window high up in the apex where the wall met the roof was the only source of light during the day. The candle had been used very quickly. Too quickly. At first, they'd been certain someone would come for them, shouting at the tops of their voices for hours on end, finishing the bottle of water far too quickly. But there had been no response, no cavalry arriving, no knight in shining armour to rescue them. The person who had locked them away was no longer there, no longer cared. The days had passed, or were they mere hours? Sleeping and waking, sleeping and waking, sleeping and waking, losing all track of time and themselves, hunger and thirst gnawing at their bodies, drowning their souls. She had been full of energy at the beginning, urging him to force open the door with his bare hands. He had tried tugging at the handle, beating on it with his fists, clawing at the solid wood, losing his fingernails, the door still intact at the end of hours of struggle. She had lapsed into silence then, a zombie-like state, staring into the distance, her eyes unfocused, cradling the empty bottle of water like one would a baby. Through their chapped lips, they had talked about their memories of childhood, lived in two different places. For him, it was a day tobogganing with the neighbours when he was 11 on some slopes out near Alderley Edge. The neighbour was German, and she knew exactly what to do, teaching her son and him all the ways of making the sledge go faster. He never saw the boy again. His family moved away soon after to live in Hale and never came back. For her, it was a first kiss, a fevered, wet exchange of spit behind the bleachers at her school, the boy boasting to his friends later he'd had her. It had been embarrassing when his sister had decided she needed the toilet. He had turned his back when she used the bucket in the corner that had been provided. Nothing came, of course. There was nothing left to come. Later, after his sister had lain down, he had tried to scratch a message into the plaster with the cap of the water bottle. But his mind could not focus. His strength was diminished. He couldn't form any words, couldn't even work out what to write. After hours of effort, all he had to show were a few meaningless scratches, half-formed words, unformed ideas. Before she fell asleep, his sister had stared longingly at the empty bottle of liquid placed next to the feathers she had brought with her. A blue bottle had disturbed him when he was sleeping, buzzing around his head. Had it been incarcerated with them, the three locked away in their own version of hell? He had spent hours trying to catch it, but without luck. Each time he thought he had it, it would dart away, just out of reach. He could hear it now, as he lay there, his sister dying or dead next to him, buzzing up in the rafters, trying to find a way out. There was no exit. He had tried to shout, but the words wouldn't form in his throat. The blue bottle would never hear them. He wasn't going to last much longer. He knew that. Hadn't his grandmother already come for him? He opened his eyes and saw the small window at the point where the roof and the walls joined. He could see a distorted moon through the thick, cobweb-sheathed glass. Or was it the sun? His eyes wouldn't focus, and he knew the end was close. The end. At the beginning of his life. Through his cracked, parched lips, he whispered the words his grandmother had whispered to him. "Father, Father, why have you forsaken us?" Thursday, June 17th, modern day. Chapter 2. Mrs. Challoner waited for the court to quieten before turning to face the jury and speaking in a quiet but firm voice. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am now going to sum up this inquest for you in my role as the coroner. I must remind you that any inquest is a three-stage process: the findings of fact, the answer to how, and the verdict in the form of your conclusion. A narrative statement can also be appended to your verdict if you so desire. Let me take you through the three stages in detail." She coughed twice and reached for the glass of water in front of her. The air was still in the court. The fans placed in front of the jury and the legal counsel simply moving the hot air around rather than chilling it. The coroner carried on speaking, still wearing her black woolen jacket and tailored shirt despite the heat. Detective Inspector Thomas Ridpath looked around the coroner's court. The family sat next to the empty witness stand. The wife dressed in black, a handkerchief still pressed to her red eyes. In front of her, the solicitor impassively listened to the coroner. On the table next to the family, almost touching, the barristers representing both the council and the East Manchester Hospital Trust leant forward like whippets waiting for the command to run. All was suffering in the insufferable heat. Ridpath was there in his capacity as coroner's officer, on call in case Mrs. Challoner needed him. It was just one of the many duties he had to perform. She continued speaking without looking at the notes on the laptop in front of her. "You have heard all the evidence in this case, including that of the witnesses in court, documentary evidence, photographs of the location, and items of property such as the rope and chair, apparently used by the deceased to end his life. Your findings must be based solely on the evidence you have heard or seen in court. You must ignore anything else, including media coverage of the case. It is irrelevant." She stopped for a moment, checking each member of the jury. "The next point I cannot emphasize enough. This is not a trial. It is an inquest into a death, an inquiry to find out how Mr. Owen Davies died. It is not concerned with attributing blame. It is simply to establish the facts of the man's death. To put it briefly, the how of how he died." A snuffle from Owen Davies' wife. The coroner glanced across at her. A look of pity crossed her face, and then she seemed to steel herself to continue. "In order for you to determine the facts, you must make an assessment of the evidence. Some has been agreed, some has not. But you must decide. What evidence do you accept, and what evidence do you reject?" Ridpath watched as Jenny Oldfield, the office manager, moved to the side of the jury box, placing a stack of papers next to the jury foreman. These were the copies of the summing up. "The evidence has been directed towards answering 4 questions. Who was the deceased, and when, where, and how did he come by his death? Once you have made your findings in relation to the 4 questions and reached a conclusion, you must record these and sign 1 copy of the record of inquest. You have copies of this form in front of you and must complete all the sections." She paused again, letting her words settle in the minds of the jurors. "I shall deal with the first question, as there is no dispute over the facts, and you will enter them on your record. The date and place of death was April 4th, 2022, at 7 Helmond Road, Levenshulme. The name and surname of the deceased was Mr. Owen Davies, and he was male. His date and place of birth was April 4th, 1957, in Sale, Manchester. He was, at the time of his death, unemployed, but had been recently a marketing director for a scientific instrument company." She paused for a moment. "Don't worry if this is too much information for you. It is all repeated in my written summation. If you need any guidance or help, please don't hesitate to contact myself or any of my staff at any time." She looked down, checking her notes on the laptop for the first time. The medical evidence...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?